Hi there, and welcome to the Plugged In Show. I'm Paul Acey. Well, Christmas is behind us. 2024 is almost in the rearview mirror now. Does it feel like it's been an extremely long year? It has been for me.
I'm okay.
You've had a few changes in your life, Adam.
It's been a long year.
So it has been an eventful year, though. We saw the Summer Olympics in Paris. In the United States, we dealt with another presidential election. We even had a full-blown solar eclipse.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I know. It was a long time ago, right?
There was also a once in every 18-year moon occurrence.
Well, the moon always occurs.
Well, no, but this is a... Dude, come on.
So what was the occurrence? I want to know.
It was at its lowest point in the sky, and it only happens like every 18 years or so.
Moonfall. Finally.
I knew it was coming.
That
I'm like,
movie.
oh, here comes Kennedy with Moonfall.
Yeah, there you go.
So this is already getting way off track, but I just saw this movie called Werewolves,
Yeah.
and it was really about the moon coming really close, and it turned everybody into a werewolf.
That did not happen.
Everybody into a werewolf.
If that was a prediction, they
It
failed.
was the worst movie I saw this year, but man, what a fun review to write. But anyway, so as we're talking about this, obviously entertainment is a huge part of our lives. It's probably a large part of our listeners and viewers' lives as well. And technology was a huge part of 2024. We probably saw changes that were unprecedented this year in terms of the advance of technology, especially artificial intelligence. So today, on a full-fledged plugged-in show, we are going to be talking about the year that was in entertainment and technology. And to do that, we have some experts in the field, Emily Chow, Adam Holtz, and Kennedy Unthank. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So obviously, we're going to start this show off by talking a little bit about what were the biggest stories in entertainment and technology in 2024. What do you think was the single biggest story? Adam, go.
I think the single biggest story was the fact that culturally around the world, more than just in the US, I think that we have reached a tipping point in understanding that social media really is harmful for tweens and teens. And I think Australia voting to ban social media for those 16 and under, Sweden is apparently about to do that. You know, we there's just this growing, there's just this growing consensus that social media, the problems with it outweigh the benefits for young users. Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, came out. I think that contributed to it. So I think that it's not that social media is going away. It's not that no teenagers are ever going to be on it or affected by it again. But I think that we've moved past this idea that it's just this innocuous thing that takes up too much time. It's a bigger story than that.
Yeah. It was a huge story for sure. Kennedy, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if it was the biggest story for most of the world, but it was pretty big to me. And that was these stories coming out that people are starting to use ChatGPT, not just for schoolwork, but for seminary classes.
Oh, that is interesting.
And I remember reading that and being like, oh my goodness.
That is...
You're going to have people with degrees who are going to get hired by churches who technically aren't qualified.
Yeah.
And that, I saw that, I was just, man, okay, that's crazy.
I think if you're in seminary and you get caught using ChatGPT for homework, I think immediately you should be kicked out of that program, because there are so many just like spiritual things that go into that, in my opinion. I would not want a pastor preaching to me who had used ChatGPT to write a sermon.
Although I do think that there is an argument to be made to use it, right? I mean, you don't want it to be writing sermons, but giving sermon topics, using it for research.
Well, no, I think
That's
I think
different.
it's a nice tool, but it's like any tool. Or if you rely on it too much, it's just going to become too much. And with ChatGPT, you're just completely stifling not only your own creativity, but you're essentially saying, I don't trust the Lord in helping me to do this.
I was about to say,
That's
you're
interesting.
silencing God's voice.
That's very, very interesting. So Emily, what do you think?
Oh man, biggest story in 2024 is, I mean, there's so many things that came out this year. Um, I think that maybe the biggest one that stood out to me was a report about Christian social media users. 3% of evangelical Christian adults say that social media is, quote, a tool of Satan, demonic, or from the devil. Yet, 8 out of 10 of those use social media anyways.
That's fascinating.
It's like, wow, it's just,
Well, it's hard not to be a hypocrite, right?
yeah, clearly. Yeah. I
That
think
is-
that's maybe the thing that stood out the most to me.
Yeah, that is incredible. That really is incredible. But so,
Well, can I say something, Paul?
Mhm.
I think that Christians especially have had a fraught relationship with technology practically from the beginning, right? I mean, there's always the opportunity to say it's transformational or it's from the devil. And the reality, I think, most of the time is somewhere in between. And there's a lot of complexity there. But this is a story that we have heard over and over again. So anyway, I just wanted to toss that in for whatever it's worth.
no, I think that's really valuable. I think that when we're talking about these issues, there is a lot of complexity to them, right? It is. That's one of the reasons why we're here. So, for my pick, I am going to go the not complex route, and I'm actually going to go a little bit the way Kennedy did. This might not be the biggest story of the year globally, but it might have been the biggest story in my household. My father, 82 years old, knows who Snoop Dogg is.
Well, I mean, welcome to 1990. I mean, good for him.
No, well,
They like playing the music, or
That's what I really want to know. Does he know, does he know not just who Snoop Dogg is, but like what Snoop Dogg does?
He sort of knows, but
Okay.
He hosts the NFL on Monday nights, right?
pretty much.
Is that how he knows?
That's kind of how he knows. He sees all the commercials. He's seen him with Martha Stewart on the Olympics. There's apparently a Snoop Dogg bowl game coming up. So
That sounds about right.
yeah. It's been interesting. It's weird to think that my dad does not have any clue who Taylor Swift is, but Snoop Dogg is right.
I have some respect for that, actually, though. I can understand, he was, I mean, when Snoop Dogg was at his peak, he was certainly of an age where even if he didn't listen to that sort of music, he did, hear about, other artists from other genres and such. So
Yeah.
I can dig it.
It's interesting because right now I'm sort of developing. Every year I do this movers and shakers list, like the top 10 movers and shakers within the world of entertainment and technology. Snoop Dogg is definitely going to be on there. Timothy Chalamet is going to be on there
Oh, yes. Peak Rat Boy.
because he is clearly in every single movie there is. But it is
Right.
interesting. This is the time of year when we start to see a lot of those top 10 lists. What is the biggest movie of the year? What is the biggest entertainment singer of the year? That type of thing. One of the more interesting lists that we come across this time of year is the word of the year.
Yes.
The word of the year. And Emily, I know you're all up to speed on the words of the
am.
year. What are they?
Well, I just want to say this real quick. 3 of these are technology and or social media driven words this year. So there are four that I found. So dictionary.com, we'll start with that one. Their word of the year was demure, which comes
Demure.
from the very mindful, very demure trend on TikTok.
Sort of Kennedy is demure, that type of usage.
I
Is
don't
that
know
right?
if he wants to be.
well, I don't even
characterized
honestly, I don't even know what the word means,
Well,
so I don't know if I
that's
should be
great
happy or
because I'll
not.
tell you. So demure. So it has 2 different meanings, and so the first one is characterized by shyness and modesty, reserved, or affectedly or coyly, decorous, sober, or sedate.
Don't you ever call me coyly ever again?
So that was the first
Coyly
one.
like a snake, Kennedy. You're
Coyly
prepared to
like
strike.
a
You're coyly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I
No.
just fought at Paul.
Okay. So next was the Collins Dictionary, and their word was brat. It is a
Of
direct reference
course.
to Brat Summer and
Or the dolls.
specifically Charlie XCX's album Brat that came out this summer and started the whole Brat Summer phenomenon on all of the social media channels. But that is characterized by a confident, independent, and hedonistic attitude, or a child, especially one who is ill-mannered or unruly, used contemptuously or playfully.
I have called my children.
Right, and that
brats at
last
times.
definition is the actual definition that got preempted by Charlie XCX this summer. So,
Well, yeah, the first
hopefully we can revert
definition.
to reality after this year.
Well, the other definition that I didn't bother, typing it out or anything, but it refers to, military brats, which I
Of
am one.
course.
So, yeah.
That's very interesting. I could make a comment about how you're a brat in all three senses of the word.
We're going to have words
Wow.
after this.
That's just
Adam, I think we should go.
Firm
Too much, Paul.
exchange of words. No, I'm just kidding.
So what was the next one?
Oxford, which was brain rot. Again, that's our last technology-driven one. So, supposed deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state, especially viewed as a result of overconsumption of material, now particularly online content, considered to be trivial or unchallenging.
I think the weirdest part of that definition is
Which is most of it.
supposed, as if it's not
Supposed.
actually true.
I think they're trying to, be a little diplomatic in that definition. Like, maybe your kid has brain rot, maybe your
I
kid
don't know.
doesn't.
When I did the YouTube review for Skibbity Toilet, I think I lost a lot of intelligence that
Lost some
day.
brain
For the rest of the week, I was recovering.
The IQ
Lost
points
some
just
brain cells
dropped
there.
right off.
Yeah. So there's one more, and that's the Merriam-Webster Dictionary's word, and they chose polarization.
Oh,
So
yeah.
those other three words I mentioned were on their, top 10 list. Like, they were looking at them, but they went with polarization. And as they put it, they were like, both sides of the political spectrum can agree on that. But the definition that they use is division into two sharply distinct opposites, especially a state in which the opinions, beliefs, or interests of a group or society no longer range along a continuum, but become concentrated at opposing extremes.
You
Man,
know
I
what?
totally disagree with that.
Oh,
I am somewhat proud of myself because when she said polarization, I thought of ions.
I just thought of Polar Express because, Christmas.
it's interesting though, because as you mentioned, 3 of those 4, definite social media connection. Even that 4th one.
It is, driven
Yep.
by social media. It probably would not have been as polarized this year were it not for social media. But yeah, no, it's kind of interesting how it does really feel this year that technology drove all of those words.
Yeah, it is super fascinating. And it does get to the power of social media in our lives today. I mean, it is so ubiquitous. I was just looking at the latest stats for who is using what social media platform. Still, Facebook is still the number 1 social media platform in the world with 3.1 billion users.
Mostly adults.
Active?
Well, yeah, you're
Or
right.
like,
Active
are like
users.
half of them died and they just still have accounts,
Well, I will say this. So if you're looking at percentages, I believe it's 83% of American adults are using Facebook, but only 32% of American teenagers are using it.
Yeah.
So there is, like, most of the people who are using it are older, not younger. So it is potentially, people who are no longer with us, or perhaps people who made an account 10 years ago when it was popular. Because 10 years ago, it was, I think, 71% of teens used it 10 years ago. And obviously that's dropped off. So it's like, maybe these are just people who never deleted their accounts and are just kind of like, I don't use it, but I have it.
So ironically, and this is ironic beyond comprehension because it qualifies as flipping the script. All of my teens are on Facebook so that they can monitor what mom and dad say about them on Facebook.
That's funny.
And I am
Funny.
not kidding. They all got on there like, you know what? I'm tired of hearing from Aunt Ethel, that you said X, Y, or Z. So I'm just going to make my own Facebook account so I can keep an eye on you myself.
You
Right?
hear
That
that?
is
You hear that,
hilarious.
Zuckerberg? That's how you get your target audience.
Teams back.
Keep
Oh my
track
goodness.
of what your parents say online.
No, that is pretty telling. It is also interesting that it's not really the first choice of teens, young adults.
No,
No.
not by a long shot.
What is, Emily?
YouTube.
YouTube.
90% of teens are using YouTube. I think it's something. I think it's like 15 or 16, or no, it's 15%. 15% use YouTube almost constantly. 39% use it several times a day. 18% use it at least once a day. So basically, 73% of teenagers are using YouTube at least once a day. After that, it goes to TikTok, which is 63%, Instagram, which is 61%, and Snapchat, which is 55%.
So it's
Those are the
interesting.
top used apps. And each of them have about the same percentage, like 15, 16% are on it almost constantly.
Almost constantly.
Yeah.
That is telling. Yeah.
46% of teens
Well, and-
total.
I would love to see percentages on adults too, because, man, I'm on YouTube constantly, and I was thinking about it the other day. If I had to choose between television in whatever iteration you want to call that and YouTube, I would pick YouTube.
Mhm.
I would
Yeah.
get rid of TV before I would get rid of YouTube, because
That's
I just
interesting.
I watch so many niche oriented things that have to do with the things that I'm connected with.
Yeah.
And I don't watch television at all.
You know,
really.
and that's
but I think that transformation has happened across the board.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really interesting point. And Adam, you and I have actually talked about this on previous podcasts, where we're talking about the nichification of the culture. And
Yep.
YouTube is the greatest manifestation in a way of that, because you can find whatever you want to find on YouTube pretty much.
It's actually, to me, when I see that YouTube is the top app for teenagers, it's not as scary. Like, there are scary elements to that, don't get me wrong. But what I think about is, okay, when you're on YouTube, though, what are you focusing on? Well, usually you're looking something up. You're like, I want to watch videos about how to beat this level in this video game that I'm playing. Or like when I get on there, I'm looking up, okay, how do I knit stitch versus how do I purl stitch? What's the difference? And like obviously I do know the difference between those two things, but I'm looking at stuff for like knitting
Obviously.
tutorials. I mean, I've talked on the podcast about my knitting habits before, so it's like, yes, I do know the difference to people who are keeping track of me, but my point is, I'm looking up like knitting tutorials, or, oh, how do I fix this thing on my car? It's little things like that I will look up, and that's probably what a lot of people do. They're like, you know what? I'm really interested in this topic. I'm gonna go watch a bunch of YouTube videos about it, and you'll find thousands of hours on any given topic.
It is crazy how helpful it can be and how problematic it can be. But to get to your point, I was trying to grow some acorns. Trying to make them into
And you
oak
looked
trees.
it up
For
on
real?
YouTube?
You were
looked
trying
it
to
up.
grow acorns?
I totally was. I was wanting to. We had this oak tree, right? And it had all these acorns on the ground. And I said, I want more oak trees. So how do we get those to grow in oak trees? YouTube.
All right.
Well, it's like music. I don't trust anyone who says they don't like any music. I'm just like, no, you just haven't found the right genre yet.
Yeah.
Because there are so many different types. That's like, it's impossible for you to not like music.
Yeah.
It's
Unless
same way
like
with
you have
YouTube.
something going on, but it's the same thing with YouTube, in my opinion, is there are just so many topics, so many niches that you're bound to find at least one thing that you like on there.
It's interesting because, Kennedy, you're kind of our YouTube expert. So you have seen tons. You're up to all the YouTube gossip. We know that there's tons and tons and tons of niches to explore.
Yeah.
In your experience, could you give us an idea of what is really popular, what is sort of rising to the surface?
I feel like I'm about to do, was it the Yakov's, like every country thing? But yeah, I mean, obviously video gaming has remained dominant on YouTube for a very long time. That's why we do a lot of video game YouTubers. There's also cooking channels that are rising. You've got makeup tutorials. You've got kind of like self-help, not kind of what you guys were alluding to about like fixing your car and stuff like that.
Like how-tos.
Yes, how to. Thank you. And then finally, you've got a lot of vlogging that's getting more and more popular. Vlogging is probably, I don't have any numbers to back this up, but anecdotally, I've seen a lot more vloggers start
That's
That
popping
is
up on
fascinating
YouTube.
to me.
They're just
Like,
people who want to see interesting lives.
Okay, so here's my question with the vloggers. Are they just like people who like the sound of their own voice, or do
Well,
they actually
it's-
have...
It's more complex usually than just staring at the camera and talking. They're usually like, I'm going to go here and I'm going to do this today. Come with me kind of thing.
Oh, okay. So it's like, spend
So
a day in my
it's-
shoes.
It's the equivalent of the slice of life genre.
Yeah.
They have that on like TikTok. It's like they have like a get ready with me videos, or like day in the life videos and such. I know those are very popular. So interesting.
It does make me wonder why those are so popular. I mean, is it sort of just this idea of putting yourself in someone else's shoes who's living a more exciting life than yours? Is it just
think
the
so.
personality?
Based on what I've seen, just like with social media, why teenagers especially like watching social media, there's something about it. This is going to sound bad, but there's something about seeing the life you want, or seeing stuff that you want and just coveting it, that is somehow satisfactory to see on social media. It's a weird phenomenon, but that is like... That is a thing. That is a trend. That like that's why people go to social media, is because they want to see something that is different from their own life.
That is really fascinating. And it goes into some of the stuff that we've talked all the time about on this show, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, you connect with this person. You don't connect with every vlogger, but usually there's one or two where you're like, oh, I could be friends with this guy, And most of the time, like I said, they're not just doing nothing. They're not just talking to the camera. A lot of times they'll do videos where it's like, I ate at every kind of this restaurant in this area, I rode on every single type of airliner, all this stuff that gets you kind of more in it. So there's a challenge aspect to it, but you also get to know them more. And then as you get to know them more, you start caring a little less about the challenge and just more about hanging out with them.
Yeah, that's a fascinating dynamic.
Yeah, it's the parasocial relationship thing.
Yep.
That you have talked about a lot, Kennedy.
Yeah, well, I didn't.
You have a sense
I
of
thought about it
relationship
in
with
my
these
head,
people.
but I feel like I've said it so many times on this podcast. I didn't want to annoy the guy who's like, oh, he said the word again.
But I do think it's really interesting because you have those two aspects of YouTube and social media in general is this idea of the connection that you have with people who you like and might not necessarily know personally, but you also have this covetousness. You're stepping into somebody's life who maybe you wish you could have a life a little bit more like that. And that's an interesting dynamic.
You start emulating it.
Yeah, and it feels like it's becoming a stronger and stronger theme throughout 2024, right?
Well, I mean, just look at Brad. What was Brad other than people trying to emulate what they had seen in that Charlie XCX video and the whole album and everything that went along with it? That was the whole reason why we had Brat Summer, and now we have like Demure Fall. It was the next thing, So there's
Coin.
another word of
Nothing
the
for
year right
winter.
there.
Just
Wily Winter.
long, dark winter.
Okay, can we make Wiley Winter a thing? That sounds like fun.
That would be pretty great. So just to go back to the social media thing, as we talk a little bit, bringing us back on track, Adam, as we sort of talk
Right.
about these social media platforms, obviously YouTube is huge. Facebook is still huge. The biggest growing platforms, TikTok, which is no surprise. That's up 9% in 2024. Tumblr is up 20%.
Interesting.
And then there's Lemon 8. 200%.
Right, which is TikTok, basically.
So Lemon
Can
8.
I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
I don't know how big, I know how big TikTok is, but I remember Tumblr kind of took a nosedive and Lemonade is rather
No
new.
pun intended.
So is it like 200% as in they went from one user to two users?
Well, and
or-
that's really the question. It is a very small platform, right? But it is owned by the same company that owns TikTok. So, and it's
ByteDance.
sort of this Instagram, Pinterest clone, from what I understand.
Yeah, it's
Very user generated.
basically TikTok's little sister, and the reason it's
Yep.
grown is because TikTok might get banned. So, in response to that, ByteDance, the parent company of both companies, decided that it was going to push Lemon 8 in the hopes that if TikTok does get banned, then they basically have a backup platform, to
Yeah.
basically
That
just
is interesting,
engage
Because
people
nobody will
with.
figure out that strategy at all.
Yeah, it's
There's nothing we
not
can
much
do.
of a strategy. But it's a different lawsuit, involved. So it's like, do you really want to pay the legal fees to sue the second company?
So when we turn to the world of entertainment, it seems like Disney has had a really huge rebound this year. Would
They
that be fair to
have.
say? When I look at like the top 5 movies of the year, you've got Inside Out 2, number 1, Deadpool Wolverine, number 2. At this time, Moana 2 is in the top 5 as well.
Yep.
So is this really a comeback? Is this a mark that Disney is back now as a real legitimate force within the world of entertainment? Obviously, it never left, but
Well, I don't know, because honestly, 2024 hasn't been a great year for movies. Like, there are very few movies that I even remember coming out this year. I'm like, okay, Dune Part 2, and Inside Out 2. So I don't even know if it's a comeback as much as it is a slower year that just naturally makes them rise to the top.
that's
And
interesting.
I will admit, that the movies they have put out have been box office successes, especially compared to previous years. But I think the competition in like 2023 was a bit more intense.
This is like
Well,
just been the year of sequels, though, because every single one of those movies is a sequel of some sort. So I think maybe that's the other thing, is that they didn't really come out with I wouldn't necessarily call it a comeback. A comeback would mean that they had original content that they were giving us. No, what they're doing is they're building off existing fan bases from previously successful years. Why was Moana 2 successful? Well, because the first Moana was one of those movies where, like, to this day, it's like all my sister's kids, it's all they'll play is Moana. They're all about Moana. So it's like when Moana 2 came out, it was just a natural, bridge to, okay, we're going to go see this movie, and it's a kid's movie and it's appropriate and yada, yada, yada. Like, I think that that's what we're dealing with this year. Half of the movies we've seen have just been sequels of some sort.
That's an interesting observation.
well, and I think it's hard to know how to measure this, but Disney finally backed off the LGBT progressive messaging in both of those movies. And I think the market responded instantly. I think people want to love Disney. And I think so many families felt burned by what they have done in the last, really, since 2017. I think it really got under with the Beauty and the Beast live action remake, with LeFou being characterized as same sex attracted. Since then, we have seen a steady march further and further into this worldview. I think peaking with Lightyear back in 2022, with not just like, a same sex couple in the background, but a core part of the story with a character and a same sex relationship. They have left hundreds of millions of dollars on the table. And I think that what we're seeing is maybe, I'm hopeful that they are waking up to the fact that audiences don't want to have progressive messaging rammed down their throats all the time. And they now have 2 data points on that chart from this year that would suggest, yeah, take it out and people come back to the theaters. I think that's the primary thing.
It is also interesting when you look at what has worked in movie theaters this year. PG movies have been super strong, not just PG-13 movies, but PG movies. You've got Moana 2, you've got Inside Out 2, you've got Despicable Me 4. These movies were huge hits. Does that, I guess this is sort of a leading question, but does that express sort of what audiences are really hungering for out in the movie theater?
I think so. I think
Well, I think that we have seen.
I think that
Go
parents.
ahead, Emily.
want to see things that they can take their whole family to, because like it's expensive to go to the theater. You know, you got to pay for your tickets, your popcorn. If you've got kids that you can't bring to the theater, now you have to pay for a babysitter too, you know. So what would be, and not to mention you're now spending that time away from your family. So it's like, if you are prioritizing your family, then you want to be able to go to the theater and give them that movie theater experience that maybe you had as a child that you remember. And you want to take them to a movie you know is going to be appropriate, that you're not going to have any, surprises or messages, being shoved down your throat. You just want to be able to go to the theater and enjoy something with your family.
Yeah, I think that we have seen research over and over and over for decades that show that PG and PG-13 movies do better than those with restrictive ratings. So even though it may feel like a trend, I think it's just a return to form. This has
Mhm.
always been the case, and I think it's been that way for exactly the reasons that Emily is talking about.
So my last question for this stage of the podcast: superhero movies outside Deadpool and Wolverine,
Hmm.
nothing hit. Are we seeing the demise of the superhero film as we know it?
No.
Unfortunately, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I think superheroes is kind of like, it really took off, kind of like how zombies did, like a decade and a half ago, where zombies was everything for like a whole decade. And I think this time it was superheroes. And I think people are starting to get sick of superheroes, combined with the fact we talked about power creep a while ago, where, you have this idea where, okay, well, the heroes beat the bad guy, so the next bad guy that shows up has to be stronger than the last one. And they've been doing that for such a long time that now they're fighting literal gods. And you can only go so far. So they're like, well, if there are multiverses, and I think people are just, okay, this is too far.
It's getting too
And
confusing.
so I think there is still room for good superhero movies. Probably my favorite movie of this year was Ultraman Rising.
Okay.
And that was a superhero movie and very under the radar on, I
Very
believe,
under the
Netflix.
radar. Yeah.
Ultraman is a famous Japanese superhero. And it was a really good story. And it was really enjoyable. And it was actually kind of grounded. It was about fighting kaiju, but it was relatively grounded compared to Hawkeye trying to shoot God, And so that was still fun. So I think, yeah, there is still a market for superhero movies. It's just, in my opinion, people are just getting burnt out by not only how many, but how over the top and how extreme the win conditions and
Yeah.
everything are.
Yeah.
I think that the other thing we're going to see with superhero movies is, so DC has been trying to do what Marvel did for a while now, and they've been struggling. It has not gone over nearly as well as the MCU has, but they now have the DCU, which is headed up by James Gunn. He's one of the main guys on that project, and he is basically trying to do for DC Comics what he's already done for Marvel Comics in terms of superhero movies. So I think we will maybe see. I know you're going to be excited by this, Paul. I think we're going to see some more Batman movies and
Yay.
good Batman movies.
Yay.
But we'll see.
Batman
always happy.
Begins again.
Don't knock Batman.
Final Fantasy 24. Wait, I don't think you know
That's
what
not a superhero.
final means. No, I know, but it's the same idea of we're repeating
Oh,
the
I
same
get what
thing
you're
over and
saying.
over. Paul, to your original question, I think it comes down to storytelling. I think people respond to good storytelling, and I think when the superhero thing took off, Disney went all in to the millionth power. We had all of these series show up on Disney Plus, and so there was a market oversaturation, but they couldn't keep the quality level up. I mean,
Yep.
really, since the end of the Avengers, since Endgame,
Yep.
the quality has taken a huge dip, and you had a cohesive narrative with characters that we cared about, and then it became an incohesive character, non-character driven, and then it became an incohesive thing with characters we didn't care about. And so I think audiences have responded accordingly. And now Chris Evans is coming back, Robert Downey Jr. is coming back now. They may be playing evil versions of old characters, but they're going back to the wells. Hollywood does what works until it doesn't work anymore, and then they go back to the drawing board. And sometimes there's a fallow period in there, but I think that we've seen that dynamic play out with superhero movies.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for this lively conversation on what was big in 2024. And we would love to listen to you, the listener, the viewer. We'd love to hear what you thought was the biggest story of 2024. What movies did you love? What music did you listen to? Which YouTube channels did you learn how to cook from? All these sorts of things. We'd love to hear it. Chime in on Instagram or Facebook. Write to us at team@thepluggedinshow.com. Go to our homepage and leave us a voicemail. That would be fantastic as well. So thank you guys so much. And now it is time for one of my favorite new games, which is called
Pop Rumble.
And Kennedy, can you explain what we are doing?
Yes, so each of you will take a name out of this cup. It is the name of a famous character from a movie, TV show, or video game. Once you tell me that you know who that character is, we will lock it in, and then I will pull from a second cup one of a big bundle of challenges for your characters to compete against each other in. These range from anything from sports to fighting to cooking to having a happy marriage. So, without further ado, you will each get 30 seconds to explain why your character would be the best at that thing.
All right.
Kennedy. And then I will choose the winner because it's my game.
All right, that sounds good, Kennedy.
It's just the ultimate power play right there.
Kennedy, let me just say, I think you have the greatest NPR voice there is. It sounds so mellow. I just want to listen to it all the time.
Maybe we can put
but
some
this is not a paid endorsement
jazz
for NPR.
Do some smooth
jazz.
I thought you were going to say NBC.
And now we're going to have Paul choose.
All right, here we go.
Read it out loud for everyone.
Here we go. Oh.
Who'd you get?
Dracula.
All right.
Can Paul choose mine too, or are you going to choose mine?
Yeah,
Sure.
let's choose.
I'll have Paul go for Adam.
All right, something bad. Something bad. Snoopy.
Oh, Snoopy versus Dracula. I love
You
that.
got Charlie
Yeah.
Brown before. That fits.
I don't
Right?
know that one because it was just sitting on top, so I just knocked out a bunch. Lara Croft.
Oh.
Okay.
That'll be
Snoopy for
interesting.
the win.
All right, we have Dracula v. Snoopy v. Lara
Lara
Croft
Croft.
from
Should be
Tomb Raider,
interesting.
if you do not know. In the battle of fighting the other characters in an empty open field until the others are incapacitated.
Oh, I love
So
it.
a straight brawl.
Clearly, Snoopy doesn't feel like the best choice here, but that's why I want to go first.
All right. Adam, you can go first. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Go.
Well, Snoopy would first come at them and he would do that hideous laughter that he does. And they would have to cover their ears and flee because it's so horrible. And Snoopy has a secret weapon. He also snarls, and his snarl is pretty darn scary. If you've never seen it before, if I were a real person, well, no, I am a real person. Anyway, it would scare me if Snoopy were a real dog. I think that's what I'm trying to say. And then, of course, he was the Red Baron, so he could swoop
There you
in
go.
on his doghouse. Plus,
All right,
Woodstock.
Adam,
It's
time's
done.
up. Time's
It's
up.
done.
Also, Woodstock.
Also,
Now,
Can't believe you didn't start
Woodstock.
with the Red Baron thing.
I would have totally started with the Red Baron thing. Although the hideous laugh is
good
pretty
for
good.
you, Paul. Next time you can do it that way.
See, if you were a real person, I would have something more to say.
Yeah, it came out wrong, but you take my meaning. Anyway,
All right,
I feel good about my answer despite your mockery, Paul.
Emily.
I think Paul should go next, actually.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I can be
It's
swayed either way.
Kennedy's game. It's Kennedy's game. All right.
Paul, are you ready?
I'm ready.
With Dracula. Ready? Go.
So we're assuming that this is a nighttime field, and if it's a nighttime field, Dracula is going to kill, literally, because he's got the sharp fangs. He can, if Lara Croft does something really evil, he can turn into a bat and fly out of the way. Snoopy really doesn't have a chance, I'm sorry, despite the snarl, despite the little laugh. I think that Dracula can
Daytime.
kind of handle that. So Dracula is super strong. He's very suave, so he could charm Lara Croft,
All
potentially.
right, time's up. Why are you going with the
Just by way of
charisma?
clarification, are we, Are we fighting against each other? 'Cause
We are
I'm not
fighting
sure I
against each
understood
other.
what we were talking
Yeah.
about here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
He would
whatever.
be so charming. So
And
charming.
now Emily.
All right, Emily, your time of reckoning has come.
I'm ready.
Go.
Okay, first, you throat punch Snoopy so that he can't do the snarl or the laugh thing. While he is exposed
Throat
with his
punching?
neck, Dracula goes for the neck, and I just wait it out. I wait until Dracula's full, and now he's full, and he's tired. He doesn't want to eat another person just yet, so I wait until it's daytime, sun comes up, boom. But if that doesn't work, I'm Lara Croft. I will just sit there and just pound him. I'm sorry, they could just, literally just duke it out until...
Well, that
The
was
passion by the end.
that was an answer, Emily.
It was an answer. Hey,
That
my
was an
answers
answer.
have gotten me wins before, okay?
That's right.
Not always.
I think-
Maybe not this
A
time.
W is a
We'll see.
W, which is why Snoopy wins.
Well, honestly, Adam, I gotta say, I think you got third place. Because there's a whole thing about Snoopy being a pilot and everything, and you completely ignored it until the very end. You just said his name.
And then you just
And
say,
you just
My
talked about
feelings
him
are genuinely
growling the whole
hurt.
time for like 29 of your seconds.
I
You guys
think-
told me to be a little more harsh, so.
Yeah, I think Adam was playing
well,
on the
you
fact
are.
that he
I'm
has a
hurt.
fear of dogs or something.
Meanwhile, I don't know, Emily,
roll.
Paul,
drum roll.
Adam, what do you think?
Oh my goodness. Going to an outside source.
I don't think so.
I don't know. I mean, I think she's Emily Croft. I mean, she's
Emily
Laura Croft. Yeah, that works.
I'm glad I'm not
Yeah, I
Emily
think- I
Croft.
think
that
Emily
would not
wins.
end well.
You know, but
Emily?
she didn't even mention the guns, right?
I didn't.
Well, okay. You didn't mention turning into a bat.
I
Yes,
did.
you did actually. Adam, I'm taking
you?
it back. Paul, I think you win this.
Yay.
Okay.
I
nice.
just,
Shut up.
I
I'm
honestly,
kind of
if
power
I'm being
hungry right now.
really honest, the guns wouldn't have worked against Dracula anyways.
No,
maybe
that's true.
maybe I secretly knew that, and so I didn't bother because
No, you forgot.
it would have needed to be a wooden stake to take out Dracula.
Yeah, it's hard to load those wooden stakes into the gun. It's
Yeah.
just difficult. Yeah,
All right.
So
Well,
there you
fun
go.
Well,
game.
congrats, Paul. I think this is your first time winning.
it is my very, very first time winning this game.
Well, congrats.
Congrats.
Yeah,
Thank
I mean,
you. Thank you. What
I'm
do I
proud
win?
of you.
What do I win?
you win my support for this
I was
podcast
gonna say you win Kennedy's.
Right?
for the remainder of
Admiration.
this episode.
Which is almost over. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you so much to the listeners and viewers for joining us as well. Really enjoyed talking about 2024. Always enjoy the game. And be sure to join us next year when we talk with Mandy Majors, author of Keeping Kids Safe in a Digital World. Mandy's daughter will be on hand too to tell us whether Mandy's tips actually work or not. So
that's helpful.
It's a super fun conversation. So you'll definitely want to be a part of that on the next episode of The Plugged In Show.